government, what kind of appetite do you see of this next government to improve these bills or at least go ahead with effectiveness or effective such bills? If you could quickly throw some thought on that.
You see, all these bills have been paid lip service to by pretty much every political party. No political party has said that they are against these bills, but the fact of the matter is no political party, in my opinion, has really been for these bills. For example, the Lokpal bill that has been passed and which is supposed to be the law of the land, its implementation is already attracting some problems and confusion, because the kind of bill that has been passed has serious problems built into it. So all these bills start with very good intentions, but they are watered down by the time they actually come to the stage of passing in the parliament and being implemented. My own sense is that whichever is the new government would not say that they should not be passed, but would either try and delay them or would try to water them down. And this kind of dilly-dallying process will continue. If they are passed, they are likely to be in some kind of a diluted form. For example, the organization I work with, we petitioned the Central Information Commission and got the Central Information Commission to declare 6 national political parties as public authorities under the Right to Information Act. But all political parties, including the one which is expected to lead the next government, have been opposing it and have not yet implemented it. Everybody says, every political party says we are for transparency, but they frustrate the legislation if it is imposed either through the Supreme Court or through some other means like the Central Information Commission. So, to my mind, there's a reluctance to be open, to share what is going on, and the intention to hide things behind the flimsy fig leaf of the laws is rather strong. So I think they will perhaps be passed, but they are not likely to be effective.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Now, if I could invite our second expert analyst for the day, Dr. Anupam Srivastava, and as I mentioned to our esteemed callers, his biodata and background is once again on the website, and I hope you've been able to look through it, so we will not take any much time on that. So without any delay, may I invite Dr. Anupam Srivastava to kind of lay out some perspective of his on the upcoming elections in India. Anupam, please, sir.
Yes, thank you. And I was able to join in a bit late, so I missed some of perhaps Dr. Chhokar's opening remarks. But you know, the kind of responses he's given to these questions, I tend to agree with him on those situations. What I'm going to do is provide some background opening set of comments to frame the issue and then take comments. So briefly, I think when you look at the election outcome, it is my estimation that the NDA will have 200 plus seats, and following that, post-poll smaller parties will tend to join it to give it a governing majority of 272 plus. For a couple of reasons. One is that the Congress has tried out everything in the last 2 terms, and there is a belief which is also tested in the last few state elections that the voter is not convinced that they have the vision and the idea and the energy, the motivation to go forward with that. And so the independent-minded or the discerning people are going to choose what is called strategic voting, which is not to vote for a party that might lose, and therefore those voters might also add to the tally of the NDA. I'm not going to touch too much on the AAP and the left front, third front type of thing, but I think largely my assessment also is that when you look at India's sort of read on how people are feeling, the last few years, and especially the last 1 year, has shown that people are frustrated with the lack of performance. They're looking at results. They're looking at a party to deal with things on the basis of pragmatism rather than excuses for failures and delays and all. And so the third front is very much part of a left of center ideology, the social engineering type of things. There is very little coming out of them in terms of taking India back to a high growth path and so on. So by elimination also, you can see that the likeliest outcome today is that the NDA will have a governing majority. Now, let's move forward then from that. There are some questions sent to me in terms of the broader economy and investment, which, having worked with the government in very senior capacity for a long time, I'm close to all of this, so I'm just summing up a couple of things. I think what you will see is if we have a Modi-led BJP NDA alliance in power, and BJP traditionally being a party that favors the traders and so on, you will see an effort to create a consensus with the states on going forward with the VAT, the value-added tax, and more importantly, the GST. The GST has had some movement in the past, and you had about 15 state governments agree to it. The issue where, and for your listeners, let me say that I report on one hand to the Commerce Minister and on the other side of my job to the Finance Minister, so I'm speaking from almost personal knowledge on this. The issue where the GST has been stuck now is once the states give up their right to levy taxes on some issues, what they want is a better formula and assurance from the center and Ministry of Finance in particular of how much compensation they will get out of the center, and would that be enough for their budgets to be able to run their program. So BJP, in an effort to actually widen the mainstream economic growth, will work hard, I think, to try and create the consensus and implement the GST, which itself will add at least 1 or 1.5% to the GDP growth. I think they will aim to have a GDP growth of 7% and above consistently. It will require certain reforms which may be painful. They may end up being less populist, but they'll have to. I think from what I understand from people who are working behind the scenes on their manifesto and so on, that is very much part of their target. They want to keep the current account deficit below 3.5%, which will be easier to do if you have a good economy. Tax collections, direct and indirect, are rising in India, have been rising for the last 15 years. So, as a percentage of the larger revenue base, sticking to a CAD of below 3.5% is not difficult. Any case, states and central party agencies, government agencies, have agreed to a restriction on their non-plan expenditures. On inflation, the BJP, I think, understands a little bit better than UPA that in the case of the demand-supply mismatch, you should not try to choke the demand, as UPA tried to do in the last 2 years by raising interest rates and so on, but rather to ease the supply-side constraints. And that works well with BJP's ideology of spurring growth, because more growth means better roads, better supplies, and supply matching up to the growing demand, and therefore that's another way to tackle inflation rather than choking off the demand. So you will see probably BJP moving on that front. And finally, on fuel prices, you will see more and more prices getting linked to market-based pricing with some subsidy for the needy sections of the society. I think that's the model that they want to move on. My last bit, I think, is on foreign policy, specifically to this group on US-India. You see already a move in the last 1 week by the Congress UPA to deal with the nuclear deal supply liability issue. They've asked the General Insurance Company of India to work out a liability clause. You should know that the Prime Minister holds the atomic energy portfolio. I have done a great bit of work on this one. So clause 17B of the liability clause, which was not considered to be friendly and sufficient for not just the US companies, but even the Russian and the French, might now be amended. There is an effort going on. And so the PM and PM's office, working with DAE and NPCIL, can in fact get this done to a point where you can then begin to implement these negotiations and have the American companies come in. The French and the Russians will renegotiate the liability clause within that. India will then go on to sign the Vienna Convention on supplementary compensation. And then you will also see on the Japanese side, the PM and the Ministry of Finance are working now on the last bit of the India-Japan nuclear deal. And that's significant because once that deal comes through, not only are a whole host of Japanese companies going to come into India, but that Japan Steel Works, a company like that which supplies more than 70–80% of critical components for Westinghouse, for Toshiba, for many others. Once they come in, then the nuclear deal implementation becomes easier. On the trade side, both countries want to take it up from its current $75–80 billion level to well over $100 billion. It requires some painful adjustment on both sides on market access and non-tariff barriers, non-market barriers, and stronger IPR enforcement. You've seen this happening now in the last few months about pharma companies in India and so on. So you will see more, to sum it up, a more business environment that the Modi government will work on. I forgot to mention on the investment side that a couple of points. I think it's not just a Gujarat model, although Gujarat is doing well on investment. But key things that have worked in 4 or 5 other states, and I've headed this portfolio so I can speak about it with some knowledge, that what has worked on 2 crucial issues. One of them is to create a single window, a special purpose vehicle that can actually help an investor once he comes in to get all the clearances and papers done by that body rather than the investor running to each office for approvals. So Gujarat, to an extent, Tamil Nadu and others are able to do the contract implementation approvals within 30 days. And you will see NDA focusing on that type of a national norm. And on the last bit, which has delayed things, is land acquisition, where there are different models in India, each work well in some ways. One model that Gujarat has done successfully is that when the farmer sells his land, he gets 2 forms of compensation. One is for a period of 5 to 30 years, he can get installments of payments. And the other is that between 10 to 30% of that land itself that he has sold, he becomes an owner of 10 to 30%. So if you have a housing complex coming up or a commercial complex or something else, he gets a part of the share of the future property that's growing, and so he earns from that as well. So rather than provide a 4 or 5 time payment at the start or something, which is very difficult and expensive for the state to do, making them a stakeholder and having them share the profit gets them invested in the success of that enterprise. Those are kinds of models you'll see the central government focus on. So let me end with that. There are a number of questions and issues here. I just want to give you a flavor of how the new government might proceed.
True. Thank you so much, Anupam. I'm extremely sorry we are kind of running short of time. Maybe we should expand the conference call times from the next time onwards, but we have maybe time for 2 quick questions, and I will summarize. We are getting plenty of questions. In fact, some of the questions are referring to, the issue of how would the next government curb rampant corruption we face in everyday life. I personally faced it many times. It's coming from someone. Another one is that what could be the next 100-day, the first 100-day plan, etc. But perhaps if we can just summarize, if we could have one quick answer from you, Anupam, and then with Dr. Chhokar also. Sure, given the effectiveness of perceived or real of the Modi administration in Gujarat, now in Delhi, how effective do you think the NDA government would be, given the fact that it's a national and several subjects are state subjects? So how effective could it be, and what could be the expectations? If you can quickly answer it, Anupam, please, and then also Dr. Chhokar, please, and then we would be heading towards the end of the call.
Sure. No, I think you see the voter mood summed up in the last 1 year worth of elections is performance. They only are looking at performance. Now, there are parties that are focusing on other issues and so on, but it's really results, economic results. So to an extent, in the honeymoon period, not just 100 days or something, but maybe a bit longer, you will see any state government and other parties wanting to work and not be seen as obstructing right at the start of a new government. So there is a window, and states will work with them up to a point on implementation. So I think you will hear a vision of its implementation. There are things I don't have time to talk about, but EBIS program, it's a national service program that's already been prepared, which will put every citizen in the country and every investor can sign in, have a digital signature, and they can make their payments for a whole range of national and regional payments that you have from your electricity to land to whatever online, and you send in a lump sum payment, the state will break it up, send it back to those places, issue a government receipt, send it back as PDF documents, and you never have to visit those offices. So there are things that the government is doing to remove corruption and removing customer interface, just like they did it with the online, computerization of railway tickets and so on. So you will see an expansion of those things happening in India. And largely, I think you'll see the sort of vision I outlined to you in terms of steps of reviving economic growth, reviving investor sentiment. Those are the sorts of steps they will take. And if they handle the opposition well, as I think they will be, BJP has been out of power for 2 terms now, they are keen to perform and prove that they are not a flash in the pan. They've done it before, they'll do it again. You will see the key in my last line here is, I think if they prove that they can create a governing coalition that is result-oriented and is delivering, and there are various ways with social media and so on for the government to map and tap into its performance and results and people's sentiment. If that is happening, then they may create a larger coalition for pro-growth type of sentiments. If they're able to succeed with that, then we'll see better results in India. Otherwise, it's back to finger pointing and other kinds of problems.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anupam. And now we have a last question. In fact, I was looking to take the same question to Dr. Chhokar, but we have so many questions coming in. I think we should take one of the caller questions, which is asking Dr. Chhokar, what is your quote-unquote prediction or estimation of the results if you were to read the tea leaves as of now?
I am afraid I will have to, I cannot answer that question because that is not the kind of business I am in. But I would like to respond to what Anupam said. I have no doubt whatsoever that economic growth is a very critical element. But I would also like to underscore that in a country like India, economic growth obviously is essential. It is necessary, but it is not sufficient, to use that cliche. Social inclusion, avoiding social strife are also very critical elements, and using social media, etc., is limited to a very small proportion of the Indian population. Obviously, that is an articulate group in the population. They are the people who understand what is going on in the world and who express themselves. But there are something like 70-odd% in the country who do not have access to all this, and who are governed by their immediate concerns of food, shelter, education, health. And those are the things that also need attention. Not only economic growth following the well-worn capitalist free market economy, which is very good, but which also has its limits. So I think the new government, whichever is the new government, I wish them well and I hope they do well, because that would be good for India. But I would not read tea leaves and say who will get how many seats. I'm afraid I will have to disappoint that caller.
Sure, sir. No, thank you so much. We do understand, and as you would understand, people sitting in different parts of the world and linked to India, everybody wants to know what could happen. But absolutely, in fact, I think what you said, it's much more the context and the overall this thing rather than just what numbers could pop up after 2 months, which nobody has perhaps any idea today. Thank you so much, sir. Now, may I invite my senior colleague and chairman of USINPAC, Sanjay, to put some concluding remarks. And Sanjay, if you would have some thoughts or questions also, because I think our esteemed panelists are still with us for a few more minutes, though we are almost running out of time, but may I invite Sanjay, please.
Ravinder, thanks so much, and obviously thanks to two very, very eminent colleagues. And the beauty of India or democracies is that people can have different opinions but still share the same goals and the means to get to those goals. And I think that's the beauty, and that's the kind of experts we want to bring. I have a couple of quick questions, and I know we are running out of time. Mr. Chhokar, you worked on transparency in politics, and as you know, I'm a huge fan of yours in that platform. A lot of Indian Americans or people outside sometimes wonder how people with criminal records get to stand for elections or win elections when these long drawn-out cases happen. Now, you live with it day to day. A lot of people who are second generation outside really do not understand the length of the legal process, that it takes 10 years, 15 years, and people can still continue in elections. Can you just speak to that? And are there people with dubious records still running for parliamentary seats this time around, Mr. Chhokar? Just a quick, short answer for our viewers, sir.
Well, people with dubious backgrounds are running for elections. Political parties are giving them nominations. And the Indian legal system does follow the dictum of innocent till proved guilty. And the Indian judicial system is slow for a variety of reasons. But in my own individual way of thinking, I actually put the blame on the politicians, because there are laws in the country like the Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, and the Civil Procedure Code, which are crying out for modification and updation, but our politicians and our elected representatives do not seem to have time for that. So the blame for the slow judiciary is shared by a lot of institutions in the country, but our political parties seem to think that if they can win elections any which way, that would be fine. And the basic problem there is, blaming political parties is also not a very nice thing, because they are not internally democratic, and there is no legislation in the country so that a political party should be internally democratic. And therefore, the democracy in India, with a lot of trepidation, one might say, is a little superficial, because it doesn't go deep down. Now, unless it goes deep down, we cannot be a true democracy. And this is where I think political parties need to change their mindset and understand, and the people need to put pressure on them. The process is on. It has taken, we've been in this job for 13 years, and some things have happened, but they are also moving very slowly. But I think that is why I say, and I sort of submitted an article to your website which says, Indian democracy starts convulsing. Now, these convulsions of Indian democracy, I think, will result in significant improvement. But one election is not enough for that. We will need about 5 to 10 years or 1 or 2 election cycles for that to take into effect. Sitting in India, I can only tell friends in the US and elsewhere that, this is an ancient civilization. Change here happens much more slowly, but it certainly happens, and it will happen.
Well, and I think you are one of the key pillars of making it happen, Mr. Chhokar. Anupam, one quick question, and then obviously I'll conclude. You talked about a fairly rosy picture of economic relationships between U.S. and India, given all the changes. Now, obviously, the U.S. has had a little bit of a rocky relationship with Mr. Modi, which, according to your analysis, is the government that's going to come into power. Do you see any lingering effects of that, just very briefly, that will get reflected in an economic or trade relationship between U.S. and India, Anupam?
No, Sanjay. And first, one line to add to Mr. Chhokar's lines. There is judicial activism in India, and so there are now limits being placed on people with criminal records running. But like he said, it will take more than one election. But there is an effort. On this one, Nancy Powell's meeting Modi, for example, and by the way, Sanjay, I did not paint a rosy picture. The U.S. and India are stuck in their trade relations and at that level for some time. China is actually now India's largest trading partner. The potential is to grow this relationship much more. Nancy Powell meeting Modi was a signal that we can at least talk business, even if we can't resolve visa issues and lingering U.S. problems with Modi's handling of 2002 riots and so on. I think all I've said, and I insist, I underline this, I've not given you a rosy picture. In the few minutes that I spoke about the major economic things that are going to be the focus of any incoming government actually, and much more so for NDA. That the US and India will look at the hard issues. That's why I said IPR, not just India having a 2005 WTO compliant law, but its enforcement. Because we are looking at technology embedded joint ventures being formed. Pharma company from India trying to sell patented or generic drug into the US or third markets. When you look at those issues, you see how the United States is applying its law and forcing Indian companies to actually do the sort of things that they're committed to. The same logic will apply to engineering companies, to other companies. So what you will see, Sanjay, I think, with the new government is that there is no, it's not a sentiment-based relationship. It's deep down in the weeds trying to solve problems of labor market reforms, market access types of things. And if we can solve that, then the US businesses have said this and demonstrated in their action that India can be a low-cost center for manufacturing and of innovation. And therefore, you can see more of US companies setting up in India to sell to the Indian market and third markets. By the way, that is happening very well for Korean, Japanese, and some other countries. So US and India are not over the hump yet on those things, but it will depend upon the abilities of the Modi government and the US administration to remove the rhetorics or the irritants like Khotagare, Devyani issue and so on, and look at two processes and fine-tune them to work with them, just like you have US working with difficult allies sometimes in the EU. That's sort of the message I would convey, that it should be business-oriented. That's how I'm expecting it to be.
Well, that's an excellent point, Dr. Srivastava, and I want to
We seem to have lost Sanjay for some reason. My apologies, everybody.
John, I'm here.
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah. Just I wanted to thank all the callers for their participation. We've had a lot of calls, a lot of questions, and I obviously want to thank Dr. Srivastava. I want to thank Mr. Chhokar. Some great insights. I really have enjoyed this call, and we're going to, as I said, it's recorded and it's going to be on our website and it's going to be pushed out. And again, participation from our callers has been fantastic. And we will be doing this call next week at the same time for our callers with different experts. And we've had a great team that has worked for the past 12 years in putting this together and putting all the activities on the Hill to build a strong relationship. And I want to thank our dedicated team of Rabinder, Sachdev in India, Via Banerjee, Vikram Chauhan, Dr. Surabhi Garg, and obviously our esteemed moderator, John, for making all this wonderful technology work, and many, many other volunteers who have contributed to making it work. So thank you all. John, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thanks to Mr. Chhokar and Dr. Srivastava for taking time, given the time difference. John?
Thank you, Sanjay. I'd like to conclude this call simply by saying that you may sign up for the next call next week. As soon as this meeting adjourns, you'll be taken straight to the site to be able to sign up there. Thank everybody for joining USINPAC's Expert Series, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.